Hi everybody, and welcome to our first Boxcryptor Q&A today. My name is Philip. I will be your co-host or moderator, and with me is Robert Freudenreich, our CTO. Well, today is our first Q&A, and the reason is very simple. Of course, we would like to communicate with you, but we also celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Boxcryptor, of the company behind Boxcryptor. And it's a great introduction for Robert. Robert is not just our CTO, but also the founder of Boxcryptor, and with Secomba, the company behind Boxcryptor. So Robert, 10 years ago, you started Boxcryptor. Would you like to talk a little bit about what came to your mind when you started developing an encryption software for cloud services?
So, hi Philip, thank you very much for the introduction. Hi everybody, I'm really honored to be able to speak to you today. My name is Robert. I studied computer science here in the university in Augsburg. And after I finished my studies, as every graduate, there was the question what to do next. I was always very interested in data privacy, data security. I was running my computers and laptops full disk encrypted and TrueCrypt and everything. And when we worked together on a different project, we wanted to use the cloud. Back 10 years ago, Dropbox was the new kid on the block. Everybody was exciting about all the new collaboration opportunities the cloud can offer now. But for me, from the technical perspective, from the computer science perspective, there was always the data security and data privacy issue, which is attached to using the cloud, which is just another person's computer, more or less. And so when we wanted to use Dropbox ourselves, we were not satisfied with the data security level, which was incorporated into Dropbox back then. And the good thing about being a computer scientist is when you encounter a problem or a challenge, all you need is a good idea, a laptop, or a notebook, and some time. And so we scanned the market. Is there a secure alternative to Dropbox? Is there a way to use existing encryption software with Dropbox? And back then, in 2011, all the existing encryption software was from a pre-cloud age. And so it was designed to work with local hard disk, with local thumb drives, but all the design of the encryption solutions back then, the design was not very compatible with the cloud. So the most popular software back then, TrueCrypt, had a container solution. So you always needed to upload the whole container to the cloud, which is very prone to sync conflicts if multiple people are working on different files. It was almost impossible to use on the mobile device if you only have a limited data connection. And on the other hand, there was on Linux a very popular encryption software which was called EncFS, and it had a totally different approach to the encryption, and this was file-based. So not a container solution, but a file-based solution, and actually this worked pretty well with the cloud. But at the same time, my co-founder Andrea, she's I would say just an ordinary computer user, and for her it was not feasible to use EncFS on Linux, and the market just did not have a consumer-friendly encryption software which was similar, and that was maybe the starting point for Boxcryptor. So it was like, okay, let's solve this problem for the ordinary user, not just for the geeks and nerds who are running Linux and are studying computer science or similar. And so I developed a small prototype which worked on Windows, and we published this prototype very early in the Dropbox forum. And I think after just a week, we had more than 1,000 downloads of our software. And the feedback we received was really great, and that was the inflection point for Boxcryptor and the company behind it. So we saw that this was a problem not only we encountered, but many people faced in their daily lives, and And so we just keep pushing and got the thing off the ground. And that's how Boxcryptor started. Back then, we were only targeting consumers, so individuals using it for their own files. But pretty soon, we also received a lot of interest from the companies and enterprises that this problem must not only be of data security and data privacy for the cloud storages, must not only be served for the individual users, but also for the company enterprises. But yes, sorry, that monologue was a little bit long at the beginning, but it's 10 years ago, but it's still very alive in my head, the starting times.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Before we, so thanks for the introduction and a little bit of history of Boxcryptor. Before the Q&A, we ask you to submit your questions. So we have a pretty good amount of questions already. If any of you have a question, I just had a little bit interaction already. Please use the chat, or you can see in your Zoom window there is a Q&A or a Frage und Antwort functionality. The Q&A today is in English, but we will provide you with a blog post, I think, and you will also receive a YouTube link. We will publish this Q&A, the record of this Q&A on YouTube. So Robert, let's start with the main topic today, the questions, and the first topic is Apple. So one question that came is very recently Apple started shipping their devices with Apple Silicon processors. Is Boxcryptor compatible with Apple Silicon?
So the good answer is yes, it is compatible. So when the first M1 MacBooks and Mac Mini were launched end of last year, we were ready from day one when the devices were available. So this is the great news. The not so good news with Apple Silicon is that Apple is tightening their operating system even more and closing it down even more. So a central piece of Boxcryptor on desktops is that we integrate directly into the native file system. To integrate into the file system, we use a native driver. On macOS, this is called a kernel extension. And Apple has discouraged the use of kernel extensions because obviously they interfere on a very low level with the operating system, and Apple does not really want that anymore from external developers. And so one hurdle to use Boxcryptor on Apple Silicon is that Apple introduced a security policy which must explicitly be activated if users want to use a software with a kernel extension. So this has to be done once, and it's a requirement for Boxcryptor to work right now. And once our kernel extension can load, everything works out of the box on Apple Silicon Macs, just as on Intel Macs before. Now the good news is about this, we are aware of the intentions of Apple, which are public since a few years, that Apple encourages third-party developers to move away from kernel extensions. Apple has already provided a lot of replacement possibilities to not require a kernel extension anymore. So for example, VPN software or firewall software or antivirus software does not need kernel extensions since macOS 10.15 anymore, because there are better integration opportunities available now on macOS. But for virtual disks, as Boxcryptor is using, there has not really been a good replacement up until now. So last week, Apple announced macOS 12, and Apple is investing a lot in the technology with this so-called a file provider extension, which is already known on iOS. And Apple will bring this very prominently also on desktops on macOS. And I can already tell today that we are actively working on a completely next generation macOS version of Boxcryptor, which does not rely on a kernel extension anymore. And I hope we will have some good news later this year.
speaking of next generation, let's stay in the Apple ecosphere. We recently released our new iOS app. It was a full redesign, full redeveloped. We have two questions about iOS before we will answer the two questions of Stefan and Dieter in the Q&A. The first one is a feature request. When will Boxcryptor support encryption on an external drive using the iOS Files app? So that means if you connect your external drive to your iPad, to your, I don't know if it's possible on the iPhone, but on the iPad, it's possible. So when will Boxcryptor support encryption on external drives?
So currently we don't, as the question implies. First and foremost, the mission of Boxcryptor is to encrypt files and protect files which are stored in the cloud. So this is our primary mission, which we are focusing our development work on. But of course, the technology which is incorporated into Boxcryptor also facilitates additional workflows and use cases. And one of these use cases is also to encrypt files on an external hard drive. It's possible on desktops already. On iOS, so there's one sentence I say very often. It's on the roadmap. So we have plans to also facilitate this use case. It's not so easy because there are some additional new edge cases. So, for example, what happens if the user unplugs the device, the external hard disk, while still editing a file, an encrypted file in Boxcryptor? Because in the cloud, it's not really. If you have an internet connection, it's always there. But I think, of course, it's solvable. And we have it on our roadmap. But of course, as with any feature request, we are a big but still small team, and we have to prioritize the development work we do. So it's not highly important right now for us, but we will look into it definitely later this year.
And maybe from my sales perspective, so I'm technical sales manager, the usage of Boxcryptor, of course, as Robert said, our goal is always to protect the files that are stored on a cloud, for example. However, on the desktop clients, using external drives or USB memory sticks is one use case that is very often used even by our enterprise clients. And now a question. I think we have some similar questions already, but I will just give you the short question. Already related to iOS, why is the combination of app protection and file browser not a good idea? So that means app protection in the sense of having a PIN protection in the iOS app, or even Face ID in combination with the Files app in iOS.
That's a very controversial topic, which we also have received a lot of feedback from our users and customers. So when we started the complete rework of Boxcryptor for iOS last year in 2020, we went back to the drawing board and did not think about how can we rewrite our existing app, but we thought, okay, we launched the old Boxcryptor for iOS app 7-8 years ago in 2013 or 12 or something like that. And how must such an encryption software like Boxcryptor look like on an iOS device in 2020? So if we would start Boxcryptor from fresh in 2020, how should the iOS app look like? And in the past 8 years, iOS had great developments and it changed a lot. So for example, Apple introduced the Files app a few years ago, which was not yet there in 2012, 2013. So back then, a few years ago, every app which wanted to interact with files was required to write their own file browser, because Apple simply did not provide a generic operating system included file browser. And that's also why Boxcryptor, the old version, had a file browser. But when we think about our company, our core competency is encryption and data security. It is not developing a nice looking and very feature rich file browser. And so back to the drawing board. In iOS 14 or now iOS 15, Apple which provides the platform which we're building on, clearly wants apps like Boxcryptor or other cloud storages to integrate into their Files app. This is what Apple recommends to developers. This is what Apple wants their developers to build on, and actually this makes total sense, because we can focus on our core competency, which is providing the encryption and security layer, and at the same time we can benefit from the development power which Apple can bring to the match in the Files app. So Apple has better opportunities to build a better and more functional file browser than we might ever be able to. And so that was a very important, and also it's a quite revolutionary approach. So I think we are one of the only, or maybe the first, so I don't know any other similar app which only works in the Files app without their own browser. But I think most of the other apps have their own browser, very much for legacy reasons, because they originated back then when there was no Files app yet. And okay, so we decided to go Files app first. And one thing is, we have the existing feature set which included app protection, for example. And of course we evaluated and analyzed how can we port the existing functionality into the next generation of iOS, of our iOS app. But unfortunately, we can only provide features which the system allows us to integrate. And unfortunately, the Files app, it does not include the concept of an app protection. So the Files app does not expose interfaces and application programming interfaces, APIs, for third-party applications to implement an app protection feature in a very secure way on iOS. And that was the reason why we decided, okay, if we want to go this route, and the strategic decision for the Files app first approach, app protection will not be able in the new world. It was a very hard decision, I can tell you. It was very controversially discussed also internally in our team, and it was really, really hard to make it. But for the medium and long term, we think it was the right decision. You never know until it's live. But of course, we received a lot of feedback that many users are not happy with it, and we are listening to it. So we are back to the drawing board again. We are looking at the new possibilities with iOS 15, which Apple provides. And so it's still not off our minds to maybe bring back some way or some kind of additional protection in the Files app. But it's a work in progress. We can't say anything yet, but we know how highly valued such a feature is by our customers.
Maybe Robert, Stefan in the Q&A, he now said or asked something very important, and maybe you can talk a little bit about our learnings. And Stefan said, how can you make a decision like that without giving the user a choice? So internally, we discussed this topic, and well, we had some learnings, not just about this feature, but also about communication. Maybe you can just say some sentences about the learnings, not just the feature decision, but also in the communication we want to improve with the next or maybe macOS version.
As always in life, you sometimes make mistakes, and hopefully you learn from it. And definitely, I think we learned from this release. So maybe it's also incorporated with our age nowadays. So in the past years, we always released new stuff. As a new and growing company, we added features, we added new stuff, and we did not have so much changing features. And maybe there we learned that we must communicate earlier and more. So that was maybe not not the best, which we delivered there in the communication part from the product side. But at the end, we as a company, we are developing a product, and we must make decisions which support our mission. And as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to protect the files in the cloud at the storage. The mission of Boxcryptor or our company is not local device security. This is actually not where we are good at. For local device security, we recommend everybody to use dedicated tools, settings, and software. So basically every operating system, or there's third-party vendors like antivirus vendors, data loss prevention vendors, which focus which focus on the local device security part. And our mission is always protect the files in the cloud and the storage. And so in such a difficult decisions, this mission guides us. And that was one of the reasons for going files at first and not being able to continue with the app protection feature.
Our question that is totally new topic. It's a roadmap topic. And I tried to sum it up for another Stefan. Basically, he asks, when do we provide a native Linux solution? So actually, Stefan is asking how you can use Boxcryptor via command line. And yes, I think you've already found our portable version. Maybe you can talk a little bit about prioritization in this question.
Good question also. And another, unfortunately, a blind spot in Boxcryptor. So Boxcryptor does a lot, but one of our guides is we want to provide the encryption solution on all relevant platforms. And of course, Linux is a relevant platform. Unfortunately, it is not as relevant as all the others. So Linux, even in 2021, it's still not the year of Linux on the desktop, maybe on the mobiles, but still not on the desktops. And as I mentioned earlier, we only have limited resources. And at the end, we want to provide the best encryption solution for cloud storages for the biggest amount of users. And therefore, we have, as mentioned, always to prioritize our development efforts. And therefore, unfortunately, as I would really love to have a Linux version, we simply did not yet have the resources which we could dedicate to developing Boxcryptor natively for Linux. We are so occupied with Windows, macOS, Android, and iOS, which have 98% of the market share of operating systems, that we better invest our time and focus in making Boxcryptor better on these platforms than having a native Linux version. It's really, it bothers me every month and every week where we don't have one. But at the same time, I'm not a magician, so we can only do what we are able to do.
Thank you, Robert. Now a question from Dieter, which is a little bit business related, I would say. Are there any plans to get a certification for classified documents? For example, from the BSI, the Bundesamt für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnik. So I think, Dieter, I know what you're talking about. It's Geheimsache, I think. And yeah, maybe Robert can talk a little bit about certifications in general, but also certification and maybe audits with Boxcryptor.
Again, a very good question, which comes up often in our talks, also with clients and bigger clients. And generally, I'm not a super fan of certifications in an agile software development world. Many certifications and similar programs and audits are designed for slowly changing products. So for example, for hardware products, which are developed once and then used for many, many years without modification. Here at Boxcryptor, we follow an agile development approach incorporated with continuous delivery. So our approach is to continuously work on Boxcryptor, continuously improve Boxcryptor, and continuously deploying the additional value to our users. And that means we have a relatively fast release cycle. So we try to release on each platform at least once every 2 to 3 months, depending what is in the pipeline. And this high cadence of update intervals does not really work very well with very long-term certification processes. So you might start the certification process with version 20, and when the certification process is ready, you maybe are already on version 24, and you got the certification for a 6 or 12-month-old version, which is actually not used anymore. So this is one of the struggles we have with certifications, is that the additional value for fast and often changing products is not a very good match in our and in my opinion. That's one factor. The other factor is so maybe that's the one of the toughest problems as a founder of a small founder, where the founders are the shareholders. So we are a privately owned business. We don't have large investors or anything in our shareholder structure. Is the tight resources. So as I mentioned, we have to clearly and very sharply prioritize where we invest our time. And certification processes are very lengthy, require a lot of work, and are very expensive also. And so for us, the effort does not really equal the benefit which we get from it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe from my side, actually the Verschlusssache nur für den Dienstgebrauch, how it's called, from the BSI. This is a certification we cannot start. So some public sector has actually request from the BSI that they certificate Boxcryptor. So there's nothing we can start. Like we did our audit last year. That's an audit we paid for, and we requested the audit to be done by Kodelsky Security. But the BSI, it has to be on a pull approach. So some person from a public sector has to request that Boxcryptor gets certified. Okay, yes, we answered this one. So next question from Rudolf. Robert, hopefully we don't have to ask our head of security, Christian. The question, how do you handle strong encryption like Bouncy Castle, export control, and App Store crypto regulations, US, France, etc.? So crypto, and I mean crypto in cryptography and not in cryptocurrencies. Crypto is still a regulated field, and you need to meet export regulations, as you mentioned, for example, for France or the US. Thankfully, in 2020 or 21 now, even strong encryption is not regulated anymore that much than it was maybe 20 years ago. And so we don't have to print out our source code anymore to export it somewhere. But so of course we comply with all these regulations. We use industry standard encryption algorithms, AES 256 and RSA with a key size of 4096 bit. And these algorithms are not subject to the, so they are subject to the regulation, but you can export software with these algorithms in these markets. So now, Eric, I'm not 100% sure if I understand your question. You ask if your software mentions Boxcryptor can be hacked, so to use other standard security features for your business. Does this mean user VPN and IP randomization? Eric, I'm not sure. Robert, can you do you understand the question? I'm not sure if I do.
Not really, sorry.
Okay, Eric, maybe can you just post it again and
clarify a little bit.
Clarify it a little bit, yes. Robert, I have some other questions that we got via mail or via the Boxcryptor community. I will start with one. This is a real question, so it will sound like we will try to advertise some of our other products, but it was a real question. Explain about other products from your company other than Boxcryptor.
So basically, we definitely focus everything on Boxcryptor, but we develop Boxcryptor further. So Boxcryptor today is not Boxcryptor 10 years ago when we started as a encryption software for individuals. So in the past years, we put a lot of effort and a very high priority for all the company and enterprise customers we have. So we developed Boxcryptor further in this direction. We added single sign-on capabilities, key management service capabilities. So it is possible, for example, to integrate Boxcryptor with a hardware security module. It's one example. And so this is a very important part of Boxcryptor, which is also important for the individuals, because all the individual requirements are the core of Boxcryptor. So everybody needs a good encryption solution. Everybody needs a good working encryption tool. And the enterprises have requirements around it, but it's still centered on the core USP. And so this is one part. Additionally, last year we launched a completely new integration in Microsoft Teams. So when everybody was sent back home into remote work, our customers really came to us. Okay, now everybody's using. We migrated to Microsoft Teams. Everybody's using Microsoft Teams. How can we share encrypted documents and access encrypted documents directly in Microsoft Teams? So this is maybe one of our most important new developments last year.
I will now try to combine multiple questions into one. And Stefan gave me a pretty good question that could be the best combination. So what's the status on full text search on Windows 10 and Mac OS? And we also received a question about the Windows drivers. Can you talk about that a little bit? I think
sure.
Spotlight and Windows drivers.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we are integrating on Windows and macOS directly into the native file system. And that also means that other operating systems could make use of the data we integrate of the files. And one of these services are search services. Unfortunately, search services are not, or the operating system search services, to be explicit, are not a regular app as any other application on your computer, but often uses very low-level operating system features and APIs. And we integrate as a virtual drive, and not all of these low-level APIs are available and compatible with our virtual drive, which we provide. And so the search aspect is always not so easy and not so usual as with any other application on your computer. So on Windows and additionally, Microsoft and also Apple are also employing a continuous delivery strategy for their operating systems. So they also change features, make new features, and so also the operating system changes which we are building upon. And unfortunately, Microsoft made changes in Windows 10, I think half a year ago, which broke our back then existing integration with the Windows search. And also Apple broke our existing integration with Spotlight due to changes in macOS last year. And so currently this is a controversial topic which is not working out of the box. It's also very important to mention that both integrations have always been advanced features or a feature in the advanced setting of Boxcryptor. So it was not a default feature because we knew about the compatibility challenges which we are facing. But of course, our goal is to bring back the search integration as fast as possible. So for example, on Windows, we will actively work on an update of the driver we are using, which will be compatible with Windows Search again later this year. And on macOS, as I mentioned earlier, we are also working on the next generation macOS version, which will also have Spotlight integration again. So I'm very sorry that this is a temporary interruption in the workflows of our users, but I would like to emphasize it's only temporary. We will bring back search on both platforms later this year.
Very nice statement. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Eric. Eric now clarified his question. I will try to make it a little bit more general. So Eric asks, is Boxcryptor sufficient as security by itself for a business or a company, or which other security you may recommend, or how could Boxcryptor be maybe one part of the IT security strategy of a business?
So definitely the answer is no. Boxcryptor is not a single solution for security, definitely not. Security is a very broad field with different components and aspects. So Boxcryptor is the right tool and solution and service to protect data stored on a remote storage in a cloud, for example. So this is what we are developing Boxcryptor for, why we're going to work every day. And we want our customers to have the best possible way and the most user-friendly way to keep ownership of their data, even when storing the data at a different service. But besides that, data security and IT security is such a wide field. So first and foremost, local device security is super important, as I mentioned. You have to use the security features incorporated into the operating systems on mobile devices. For example, Touch ID, Face ID, full disk encryption of the hard disk, like BitLocker or FileVault, or VeraCrypt, for example, who prefers. So there's so much more. Of course, on Windows, antivirus is a must. On macOS, it's discussable. But still, there's now also with Microsoft Defender, Microsoft has a very good solution in this space. You need two-factor authentication. Identity protection is super important. So password management, so that you have unique passwords, you need a password manager or a good single sign-on solution. So there's, I think you could talk hours about it. But definitely Boxcryptor is only a part and not the whole.
Maybe one last question regarding of the roadmap of features. One we received during via the Boxcryptor community. The question was, if you encrypt files with Boxcryptor and multiple persons are working on that specific file, is there any way that Boxcryptor can at least give up a warning that the file is open by someone else, or do you have to live with two maybe copies of the file you're using at the same moment?
So currently it is not possible in Boxcryptor to notify somebody if he opens a document and somebody else is already working on it. Of course, as we received this feedback also already before, and we always evaluate how we can improve Boxcryptor in the space. So, for example, many cloud providers offer a so-called file locking feature. So, where somebody who decides to work on a document can actively lock a file, and so that others are prevented from modifying it. So, of course, we evaluated how we can integrate into these functionalities. And we have, for example, we built a small proof of concept, how this could be incorporated in Boxcryptor. But I also have to hint at the roadmap. So this is nothing we are actively working on right now. We have some ideas how we can improve Boxcryptor in this area. And we are always happy for feedback from customers and users, which help us to prioritize such a feature. And but we see the need that Boxcryptor improves the ways how people can collaborate on the same document at the same time.
Okay, now some very typical questions that we receive pretty often. Let's start with one feature provided by Boxcryptor, that's the file name encryption. So is it normal that there are file names displayed as Asian characters in my cloud storage?
Yes, it's a feature and not a bug. Okay. So when we implemented and designed the file name encryption at the very beginning, one of the requirements was that encrypted file names may not have too many characters, because Microsoft back in 2013 and still in 2021 often limits the maximum number of characters in a file path to 256 or 55 characters. And so when we encrypt the file name, the resulting actual encrypted file name may not increase the overall path length too much, even if we need to encode more information in the encrypted file name. And so we came up with, actually I'm pretty proud about it, and I like it very much. We came up with a new encoding scheme, which we call internally base 4K, similar to base 64. We use 4,096 different Asian UTF-8 characters to encode the encrypted ciphertext. And because in one Asian UTF-8 character can encode up to 3 byte of information, up to 3 byte of information. And a Latin ASCII character can only encode 1 byte. So we need less characters for the same amount of bytes to encode. And this shrinks the number of characters in the encrypted file name. And so we get shorter file path, and we better fit into this maximum file path limitation of Microsoft Windows.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Well, we are located here in Augsburg in Germany, and we are developing Boxcryptor here in Germany. But one question was, where are our servers located, and where do we store the data we have from our users?
So first and foremost, we are a German first company, so to say. So the company is incorporated as a GmbH here in Augsburg in Germany. All our employees are living in Germany, most of them here in Augsburg actually. And our servers are located in 2 different data centers at different geolocations within Germany. So our service is provided as a high availability service. So we have load balancing, redundancy in our infrastructure, but everything is happening within the geographic boundaries and legal boundaries of Germany.
So Robert, we try to answer all questions here. So one very critical question: why are you not open source? Why is Boxcryptor not an open source solution?
You pick the easy ones, right? It's also a controversial discussion, and there's definitely no black or white or right and wrong answer to this. Of course, I would love to open source all code of Boxcryptor tomorrow. That would be really awesome, because I see of course there's an added value of open source transparency for data security, definitely. So, but at the same time, our goal is to have a long-term and sustainable way to run our business. So, because as you mentioned, we are now 10 years into Boxcryptor, we are still we're stronger than ever. We have more resources than ever, and we want to continue this way. So we want to continue to develop on Boxcryptor in 2030 and 2040. And in order to support this long-term and sustainable vision, we need a business model which supports this. So at the end, we are people living off. We have to pay rent. We have a lot of our employees have families at home. So we need to earn money to have a sustainable company. And this is the basic requirement for sustainable development. And we decided that the right business model for us is a subscription software as a service model. And this means we must provide a service with a competitive advantage over our competitors. And if we publish our source code as open source, this is definitely a challenge, because the competitive advantages which we might have would be more open to other people and other persons. So it's definitely a risk if we would go this way for our business model. And at the same time, while open source is a great improvement for trust and security, it's not a silver bullet. So even if the source code is published, there's no guarantee that other experts are actually reviewing it. So there have been a lot of examples in the open source world where very critical bugs have been undiscovered for years and years and years. So only being open source is not a guarantee to be more trustworthy or more secure. And one additional point there is users must also have the guarantee that the app they are installing on their device has actually been compiled out of the source code which has been open sourced. And this is a challenge, for example, on the mobile devices, especially on iOS, where apps are distributed as binaries through a proprietary app store. So it's very hard to make the guarantee that the app a user is actually using on his or her device actually originates from the published source code. There are efforts in this way on desktops, for example, reproducible builds or something like that. But it's not as easy to say, okay, we open source, we publish the source code, and then Boxcryptor is even more secure or even more trustworthy. In the end, users always have to trust the vendor of the security software or any software they are using. So not just Boxcryptor, but even their Apple device, for example, or their Google Android operating system. So it's always about trust. We try to do as much as possible to foster this trust in Boxcryptor, even if it's closed source. So you already mentioned it. We had an independent security audit by Kudelski Security last year, who analyzed our Windows software source code for potential bugs or malfunctions or something like that. And we also have this in regular phases from our enterprise customers. And but for us, the decision we are evaluating very often if open sourcing would be a right next step or not. Up until now, we always decided against it. Yeah, we will see what the future will bring here.
Perfect. We are slowly moving into more political topics. Before that, I have two questions that, maybe will lead us more into that political stuff. First of all, why is there no Boxcryptor Cloud or Boxcryptor Cloud Storage?
Focus. We have a clear vision of our product, a clear mission, and we focus on it relentlessly. So of course, it's a pretty easy step for Boxcryptor to say, okay, we encrypt cloud storages. Why don't we provide an encrypted cloud storage? Like there are also others on the market. why don't we do it also? For us, it's always important to focus on what we are doing, to have a very clear focus, and this is provide additional security for existing cloud storages. And this is what we're working on. And providing our own storage would distract us from this focus, and that's why we don't do it. So there are a lot of users and as well as individuals or businesses who have their cloud storage, and they do not want to change their cloud storage vendor, but they want to add additional security, and there is a need for such a solution out there, and we are the right ones to fulfill this need.
Mm-hmm. But on the open source question, you already mentioned a little bit about our subscription model. So what would happen if we go bankrupt? What happens to my data when your company no longer exists?
So first and foremost, this business model allows us to not go bankrupt. So we started 10 years ago. We had a little initial seed funding from 3 business angels from Germany. But since should be 5 years now, we are a profitable operating company. So we spend what we earn and we grow out of our revenues. And so we have a very sustainable approach to this question. But Boxcryptor has been designed not only with privacy by design or security by design, but also with what's the right word? The opposite of vendor lock-in. A business continuity in mind. So every user can always export all the keys which are stored on our servers. So you can log in at boxcryptor.com, you can scroll down a little bit, and then there's an export keys button. And if you export your keys, you download a file which contains all the keys which are stored on our servers for your user account. And this key file always allows you to encrypt, or encrypt also, but most importantly to decrypt all the files which you have encrypted with Boxcryptor with your account. And so I'd encourage everybody who is skeptic in this direction to export his keys, to store the key file locally on his device. The important part is this key file is not sensitive because all the private key material in there is already encrypted, just how we store it encrypted on our servers. And with encrypted, I mean encrypted with a key only the user has access to and not we. So this key file does not need some specific protection. And then if you have this key file and you have a Boxcryptor application, you can always access your files, even if we as a company do not exist anymore, or if the data we store would not exist anymore at any time.
Big question from Stefan. Is it safer to store my key locally?
Stefan is really active.
We have different Stefans. We have
okay, Stefans. Or it's a pretty popular name in Germany, or in the world in general. Is it safer? Ooh. It depends on the quality of your password. So if you have a very unique and strong password as an individual customer, we derive the initial encryption key for your private key material from your password. So you can say the security of Boxcryptor depends mainly on the quality of the user's password. If you have a very strong and unique password, your private key material is encrypted with AES 256. So there is no way to decrypt or to access your private key material without knowing your password. Of course, if you have a local key file and you protect the access to this key file, you do not rely on the encryption itself alone, but then in the end, you rely on the encryption of your files, which is the same encryption basically. So in my opinion, it does not have a real practical security benefit over a Boxcryptor online account.
Robert, you mentioned the password. What happens if a user forgets his password?
Yeah, then
maybe give us a short answer.
Then the good thing is access to the encrypted data is lost, which is actually a good thing. That's the security promise which we make as Boxcryptor. Without the password, it's impossible to access your encrypted files. It's plain impossible. There's no technical way to access encrypted documents without knowing the password. Of course, this means that more responsibilities are shifted to the user. So if you do not use client-side zero-knowledge end-to-end encryption, the user does not have as much responsibilities because the cloud provider can always give him access again if the user forgets his password because the cloud provider has access. But unfortunately, more or less, the additional increase in data security comes at the same time with an increased responsibility for the user. What I was just talking about is the individual consumer use case. Of course, in the company and enterprise setting, companies need a better solution. Yeah, so companies cannot risk data loss just because an employee forgot his password or left the company, or maybe there was an accident or something. So in our company and enterprise offerings, we have dedicated features to grant the company access to employee data, to encrypted employee data, while still keeping our company, the Secomba GmbH, out of this calculation. So we, the Secomba GmbH, we, the service provider, the encryption solution provider, even in the company enterprise setting, cannot access the data of our customers or cannot decrypt the encrypted data of our customers, but our customers have features to prevent data loss for lost passwords, in case of lost passwords.
So Robert, it was a great transition, almost as planned, to some of the, well, I would say political questions we got. We got some via our Boxcryptor community, but also today via the chat. I would say normally, of course, we always get questions like this, but the current events, if you read news, the current events, yeah, we led to read these questions. And I will start with one question from the chat today. Is there a risk? So let me start first. You mentioned the zero knowledge aspect of Boxcryptor. Yes, you have to trust us that what we say on our technical overview and of course what the audit says is true. So Boxcryptor is zero knowledge. However, is there a risk of man-in-the-middle attacks with Boxcryptor, as the German authorities got new powers recently? So I think, yeah, like the Staatstrojaner, the Bundestrojaner, the state Trojan.
So what I would like to add regarding trust on Boxcryptor, we also have published a source code in different languages from C++ to Java and .NET. For example, we published a standalone decryptor tool for Boxcryptor, which shows and it has code and demonstrates the source code required for the actual file decryption. So while the Boxcryptor application is closed source, there is open source code available for the actual encryption related part. So everybody can go to our GitHub repository and GitHub account and view the source code, how Boxcryptor encrypts and decrypts encrypted files.
Yep. I posted the link in the chat if you want to check it out.
Yeah, and he can, for example, run it on their own computer with their actual encrypted Boxcryptor files to really validate that what we are doing is what we are saying. Regarding the authorities, so that's one important aspect, is that we are subject to German regulation and German laws. So there is no, currently in 2021, besides some politicians demanding such laws, there is no law which can force us as a private company or any of our employees as individuals to weaken the security of Boxcryptor. And whenever this situation should change, we will definitely make the required legal changes that we can still provide the zero knowledge end-to-end encrypted solution with the best possible security to our users, even if this is not possible in Germany anymore. But as of today, this is not possible, neither in German nor in European law. And I think the example you mentioned from the Staatstrojaner, or the Trojan malware, the government-funded Trojan malware, it actually shows that end-to-end encryption works, because the goal of the Staatstrojaner is to access data at the endpoint before it has been encrypted or after it has been decrypted. So first of all, what we also do is, like, we also feel it's our moral obligation, as we are a company working in this field. We actively work with politicians and try to convince politicians that weakening encryption, weakening IT security is not the way to go forward. It's not the future we want to live in. So we actively try to address politicians, and we, for example, 2 weeks ago, we co-signed a public letter, which was also co-signed by the Chaos Computer Club, but even by Facebook, that the Staatstrojaner is definitely not a good idea for the overall IT security system, and so we are active in this space, and yeah. I hope, did this answer the question? If not, just ask again. I hope I could make it clear.
I think so. So I just posted the link to the German news portal heise.de, and also the direct link here.
And maybe get one step back. And due to the zero knowledge and security by design approach we are using for Boxcryptor, we are designing Boxcryptor in such a way that it is not that authorities cannot actually, or how do I say it? That we make the work of authorities very hard in this regards, as hard as possible.
But I think it's a very hot topic, because, yeah, as I said, we have received multiple questions from that perspective. So if any of you have more questions, please use, use the time now to post the questions using the Q&A or the chat functionality. Maybe, Robert, I have one more question, a little bit about our iOS app and how we work at Secomba at Boxcryptor. So how did you manage to develop the Teams integration you mentioned earlier, and the new iOS app during the COVID situation? Was there any trouble getting the team together, or in communications?
So when the whole COVID situation developed in Europe and in Germany especially, we immediately, so we are normally not a remote first company, so we have our office here in Augsburg. Most of our employees work out of the office, and but immediately when we saw this pandemic arising, we said, okay, if we can't work from home, then nobody can. And so it was I think we were 1 week earlier than the official announcement from the authorities. We sent everybody to their homes to work remotely from their home office. And this is mostly the case since over a year now. So most of our employees are working from home. The office is open again for anybody who prefers to come into the office again. but the vast majority still works from home. And I think we benefited a lot in the situation from, well, I call it the social capital. So we have a very trustworthy team. We have team members who are working with us since the beginning, since 10 years ago. So we have a very well-oiled team together who is where everybody knows each other very well. And so we could profit from this social capital and the mutual trust which we have with each other during these difficult times. And so actually, I would say we were still extremely productive in this time. I think we delivered great work in this time, but at the same time, I think everybody is pretty eager to meet their colleagues face to face again.
And are we hiring? Are you hiring is the next question.
Yeah, definitely. So we are always looking for new colleagues who can strengthen our team, who can help us delivering a great privacy and security solution for everybody in the world. So if somebody in the audience might feel like you're always welcome to apply on our website, even if there's no direct job listing. Yeah.
Yep. I'm just on the jobs page at the moment, and I think we have 8 open positions from development, quality assurance, sales. So just as Robert said, yeah, apply. And yeah, we could just got a new question. What do you think of services offered by Microsoft and recently Google for encryption of files in their clouds? They save the keys in its HSM hardware security modules.
So generally, I'm always happy to see other, especially the big 4 or 5 tech companies, if they launch additional encryption and client-side encryption solutions, because there is definitely not enough available right now. So first and foremost, it's a very positive sign that even in the big tech companies, even in the US-based ones, data security has a very high priority. So that's great, first and foremost. At the same time, I'm not always 100% convinced that this is the solution customers should choose. So one key aspect of these solutions is often that maybe the keys are stored somewhere else and not directly at Google or Microsoft, but still at the same time, Google and Microsoft always has access to the keys. Maybe this access is locked and you can better audit the access, but still the access is possible. And that's a huge difference with Boxcryptor, with the zero knowledge approach. We are never able to access the keys of our customers. And also the service providers are never able to access the keys of our customers. So I think that's a very important aspect. Maybe these services offer client encryption, but in most cases, they don't offer zero knowledge client encryption. And that's a huge difference, in my opinion, for the security of the data. And at the same time, of course, if it's the same organization managing the data and the keys, or having access to the keys and having access to the data, maybe that's not the best way to share responsibilities and to share trust.
Yeah. So, Robert, we will wait for some more questions. Until when, maybe you could talk a little bit about the next big steps for Boxcryptor or for the Secombers, or what are your maybe personal goals, or what do you try to, which impact do you try to make over the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years?
2 to 5 years planning in an agile development world and an agile ecosystem is a really hard one. maybe I repeat myself, but the mission is to provide the best end-to-end encryption solution, zero knowledge based for cloud storages. And this is what we will continue the next years. Of course, you can break it down to smaller achievements. So as I meant, so one of the important parts which you currently have 10 years into the business is to modernize all of our applications. So when we started 10 years ago, the ecosystem was different, operating systems were different, technologies were different. And now is a good time, 10 years in, to relook, to take a new look and a fresh look on all our applications and modernize them for the next 10 years. So we started with Android last year. We completely rewrote from scratch our Android application last year. It's much more stable now. It's much more easy for us to develop new features. It's much more compatible with new Android versions than ever before. We followed with iOS this year. iOS is also the new iOS app is also the base and the foundation for a complete rewrite of our macOS app. And I think you can easily see that then there's Windows missing. So we will also take a look how Windows should look like in 2021 or 2022. And because we are a subscription business, that means customers do not purchase a product once. They purchase a service that they can access and use their encrypted files now in 2020 and in 5 years in 2025, and we must provide the right software for it. And that's an important part. And another high priority is many of our customers are based on the Microsoft stack. So they use OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams now. And we have a great demand from those customers to further improve data security in the Microsoft ecosystem. So Teams was definitely a first step, and we will continue this journey to provide better end-to-end encryption solutions for data in the Microsoft ecosystem.
A follow-up question. Yes, we always talk about Boxcryptor, and we now got the question. You have not yet said anything about Wisply. Any plans for this service?
Maybe because Wisply, in my mind, is more a feature of Boxcryptor than a separate product. So when we launched Wisply a few years ago, we saw the potential as a separate service, so that it can be used independently from Boxcryptor. But as we have now learned in the past years, most usage actually originates from actual Boxcryptor users and Boxcryptor usage. And so if we look at this at Wisply, I think it's pretty reasonable that maybe Wisply will at some point in the future not be Wisply anymore, but maybe Boxcryptor Send or something similar, which is more integrated into and more connected to the Boxcryptor product. So it might migrate into a Boxcryptor feature and not be a standalone product anymore. But the functionality is a very important part of the Boxcryptor solution, let's say. So cloud storages, in my mind, have three use cases. The first use case is a backup and device synchronization tool for individuals. So as an individual user, I want to have my data securely backupped in the cloud, and I want to access it on all my devices. The second use case is the collaboration use case. I want to collaborate with my coworkers on a shared storage space with documents. And the third use case is I as a user want to share files easily with somebody else who is not necessarily my coworker. And this is like the public link sharing, which everybody knows from the big cloud storage providers. So this is also a very important use case for Boxcryptor. And now it's implemented as Wisply, as a standalone product. And maybe at some point in the future, it will be a Boxcryptor feature instead of a separate product.
Thank you, Robert. I would say last call for your questions, and want to thanks Lisa. Lisa is providing you with all the relevant links in the chat. Just a few infos. If you, we will of course send you a record of this Q&A here. It will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. But yeah, you will always also get an email with that. And if you want to be up to date with Boxcryptor, hopefully you already signed up, but you can sign up for a newsletter, follow us on Twitter. Now, one more question, Robert. Schumacher.
From Stefan. Let me.
No, it's Stefan. Christopher. Schumacher, Rosberg oder Vettel. I think Robert is more like the soccer football guy.
Yes.
Yeah. So of course we are big fans of the FC Augsburg, but for me it's Vettel. And yes, so thank you everybody. Last call. We will give you maybe one more minute, and hopefully you can enjoy. Most of you think are from Germany. You can enjoy the very good weather. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to always contact our support team, support@boxcryptor.com. We not just answer all the technical questions or if you have issues with Boxcryptor, but we can also answer questions on integrating Boxcryptor or how can Boxcryptor help you with your business and your data privacy. Okay, I think no more questions. Robert, thank you very much for taking time today.
Thank you very much for listening. I'm very honored that you spent your time listening to me talking.
Okay, so thank you everybody. And as I said, you will get on a record of that Q&A. Thank you everybody. Bye bye.
Goodbye.